Today is International Women's Day, so we've dedicated this hour, the 8 to 9 a.m. hour, to having conversations about International Women's Day. This year's theme is choose to challenge many things, to choose to challenge gender equality, choose to challenge women representation, choose to challenge whatever you want to choose to challenge. Let us know as well on Spice FM KE on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. So, City, as you look at the International Women's Day and as we celebrate it today, and going that theme of choose to challenge, what do you think would be like the bigger thing to challenge for you?
You know, when you look at the world around us, and you look at any form of injustice that this planet has witnessed, the greatest recipients of this injustice has always been women and children. And I think it is from this background and this understanding that over time, women have sought to champion causes that are particular to them and also particular to society. But the focus has been, because of the disadvantaged position that women have found themselves in, to actually bring them to a position where there is some element of parity, a focused, purposed attention on issues that relate directly to women in whatever sphere of life had to be championed. And that is why you find women championing all these causes right across the divide of the disciplines that you can think of, because of this understanding. Because historically, at some point, they were always disadvantaged. And disadvantaged as in they were never given the same opportunity as men were given. No, they were not.
So it's time to push that now.
It's not just time to push, it's to continue pushing, because discrimination doesn't begin and end in a day. Even if you declare today and next week and for the next 3 months International Women's Day, it's not suddenly going to end any discriminatory practices that people have. But the emphasis gets people to understand that it isn't just a push for what we call a broad-based equality, no, but it's to understand the distinction and the variety of differences that would exist in this need, the similarity that would exist, and how it would help the general basket of good that mankind wants for itself. That's really what it is. But at some point, to get it to be noticed, there needs to be a singular push that may even seem to be disproportionately pushed. But that, in many ways, is how you right a
historical wrong.
Yes.
Indeed. Advancing women's economic and social rights. That's what we want to discuss for the next half an hour. And let's bring in our guests for this half hour. Katrin Hagemann is the Deputy Head of Delegation for the EU in Kenya. And we also have Patrick Wilson, who is the Deputy Mission Director for USAID Mission to Kenya and East Africa. They are joining us on the line. Good morning, Katrin.
Good morning.
Very good to have you on the show. Happy International Women's Day.
Thank you. Asante sana.
And we also have Patrick on the line. Indeed, asante sana for joining us. When you talk about advancing women's economic and social rights, maybe we first of all need to start defining or even the scope of these economic and social rights. Let's start with you, Katrin.
All right. Yes, we've been working in Kenya and all over the world in advancing women's social and economic rights. What is that? That's everything from sanitation, education, a better livelihoods of women, but also better access to justice, etc. So there are very, very many aspects to where women have been traditionally disadvantaged and where we can make an impact in lifting women to a more equal level.
So what is it that you've been doing as the EU, for example, over the years in terms of the programs that you've had in place to push this conversation to advance women's economic and social rights?
I think we have both general programs and then specific programs working for women. But one of the things that for us is important, that we don't just do one little program where we focus on women and then for the rest we forget about it. But we now have an action plan that requires us for every single program that we do, whether we build a road or support democratization or whatever we do, that we have to look at what does it mean for women, how does it affect women, what do women specifically need. So it's not about a specific program for women, but about all of our work that we do in Kenya and in any other country that we're active in. So in Kenya specifically, we've been doing quite a bit on addressing poverty, and there, of course, we know that women have been disadvantaged. There's a higher percentage of women living in poverty, being single households. So those things we try to take care of in the programming, the general programming. Similarly, even something that sounds so technical as building a road, there are issues around that are specific women's issues that we need to look at. And then on top of that, we have programs that specifically address women. We have, for example, right now, a call open, which will end on Friday in the agricultural sector, asking women agripreneurs to sign up, where we can support them with training, with grants, with loans to try to further their agricultural business. We had in the past a program on, we supported the Miss President show, where we had quite a few very talented women who competed to become Miss President of Kenya. And we know that some of the finalists are now making it into government. So there we have some very nice action that is empowering women to take more leadership roles, to get more active in politics. Not all of them will go into politics. Some of them may become leaders in other areas, and that's just as well. So there are various programs that we have, and I can go on some more, but maybe that's a good example to begin with.
Indeed it is. Maybe, Patrick, you can just tell us what USAID has been doing in terms of programs and projects to support and promote women empowerment.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to do that. And I do want to wish you all a happy International Women's Day. You know, today's about highlighting the accomplishments and the challenges that women and girls all around the world face. But this isn't a day just for and about women. This is a day for all of us, boys and girls, women and men, because women's rights are human rights. That's why we all have to participate in this. That's why I care about this. So the United States government, much like our colleagues at the European Union, we put the needs and the interests of women and girls really at the center of everything that we do. So regardless of what the program is, we're looking specifically at how, for example, a given challenge affects men and women differently. And we tailor our response to make sure that we are reaching men and women where they are and what their unique challenges are. But we also have specific programs that are exactly directed towards the needs of women here in Kenya. So, for example, something that might be of interest to you there in the studio, we're working to empower women in the media. We have a mentorship program that matches aspiring female journalists with established journalists to help them improve their communication skills, their leadership skills, their overall life skills. You know, we've just celebrated the beginning of our third cohort of young female journalists, and it's the largest one yet. We have 14 mentors and 40 students from 4 different universities around the country. We've also just completed training 53 young women to enter the energy industry across 10 countries in East Africa through our Power Africa initiative and our Young African Leaders Regional Leadership Center. Over the last 6 years, trained and empowered 4,000 young people from 14 countries in East and Central Africa to be leaders in their communities. And because women's leadership is especially important to us, and we think it will benefit the people of East Africa, we make sure that half of the slots are reserved for young women to make sure that they can participate. we all have a lot to do to make sure that women have their fair seat at the table where decisions are made. You know, here in Kenya, women currently occupy only 22% of the seats in parliament. Only 4% of the governors in Kenya are women. And I will point at my own country. In the United States, about 25% of the Congress are women. About 18% of our governors are women. So for myself, as a man, I say, why is this? Why do women continue to be underrepresented in political leadership? So are we men doing our fair share with the household work? Are we taking on childcare so that our wives have a chance to start a business or run for office, take on leadership roles in their community? Are we teaching our boys that it's also their responsibility to carry the water or make dinner?
Patrick, if I can interject there just really quickly.
Absolutely, please.
The projects that you talk about, it's a deliberate effort to make sure that women, girls are involved, whether it's in a learning, in a mentorship program, and then going on to establish their careers. It is clear that it can be done. From your experience, why do you think then it's so difficult to have this replicated on a national government level, whether it's in Kenya, whether it's in the United States, like you've just pointed out? Why is it so difficult then to have that cascade?
I think a lot of it starts, as I was saying, really at the household level. What examples are we promoting within our society of what women's work is? Is women's work just in the household? You know, women in Kenya spend on average about 11 hours a day working on household work, as opposed to 3 hours a day for men. I know for myself, when I was growing up, both of my parents were professionals. They both had jobs outside the home. And so they also shared in the housework. My father mopped floors and cooked dinner. And I saw that growing up, and I recognized that my father's masculinity was not threatened by doing his fair share. And that has helped me be the man that I am today. And so I think if we can replicate that really at a family level and get individual families and communities thinking about how do we take advantage of half of our population, half of the talent pool. It's girls and it's women. And if we can do that, then I think that national scale up that you're talking about can happen, and it will happen organically.
When I listen to this discussion, something keeps niggling at the back of my mind. We are focusing on bringing about some parity, some equality. And for us to do that, it means we recognize that it doesn't exist. Now, what will success look like? What is it that when we arrive at, we will know we have achieved what we want to do? I'm asking both of you.
You can start with you, Patrick.
All right. I think it's dangerous, or at least perhaps misleading, to think only in terms of quotas. For example, if at least 1/3 of parliamentarians are women, then we've achieved our goal. Or if in a salary scale, women are making at least 80% of the same salary that men are for the same position and the same work, we've reached our goal. I think that's perhaps a bit simplistic. What we need to be thinking about is agency, the ability of girls and women to make their own choices, to have an ambition and to have the opportunity to achieve that ambition. We talk about equality, but really what we need to be talking about is equity. And equity means that you recognize that two people may be starting from different places, that maybe because of traditional beliefs or historical injustice, one person has a disadvantage over another. So if all we're talking about is equality, we're raising both of those people to by an equal amount, there's still going to be a difference. There's still going to be a gap there. When we talk about equity, we're talking about looking at that historical injustice, the disadvantages that people have faced, and raising them to a point where then they have a fair share at the table, a fair opportunity.
Okay.
And if we focus on women's agency to do that, that's when I think we'll be successful.
Patrick, you've done a wonderful job of rephrasing my question and answering the question that you've set for yourself. Thank you. So let me ask Katrin the question that I asked you. Katrin, the question I asked, and you also have a leeway to rephrase it, and as has been done, because it's been done masterfully, success, whether it is equality, equity, parity, what should it look like?
I think that success is if every woman and every man, every girl and every boy can fulfill their potential and doesn't feel hampered by blockages of the system, of the society, etc.
Okay, now, if, say, for instance, we get to a point where we have this equity, where women, men, girls, boys have this equity, right? What next? When we get there, what do we do next?
Then we celebrate. No. I think that's look. The question is more generally, if we think about what is the world that we want to live in, what are the things that how we want it to look like. There's that you can talk about climate change. You can talk about the fulfillment of all of the human rights. Of course, there's a point where hopefully we get to the point where we have achieved that, and then do we live ever happily after, or do we find something else that we hadn't looked at before, something else that we still need to address? That's looking into a crystal ball a little bit. But I think where we have inequalities that we have identified, where we have problems in today's world that we have identified, these are the ones that we work on now. And as we then go along, we will always find something else that needs addressing. And that we will then have to tweak.
Actually, where I was leading with my question is, even as you make gains, there is always a likelihood that you could lose those gains. So
Indeed.
Where I was heading towards was, how then do we ensure that we sustain, maintain, and ensure that those gains are never lost? Because even as we talk about empowering, because it's a discussion we've had in this country, empowering the girl child, the alternate discussion that has arisen is the disempowering of the boy child. Now, what we are saying here, if I understand it correctly, is just making sure that that equity, that equality, that parity is maintained at all levels and with all genders. So how do you ensure that what is gained is not lost?
Indeed. I mean, if you do the simplistic view of saying I'm putting 50% women for the next parliamentary session, and then I'm not doing anything any longer, you're right. You may find that afterwards it drops down again. So just a quota may temporarily help to raise awareness, but in the longer run, you need to, as Patrick was saying, you trickle it down to the household. It's having role models at all levels, from the parents to the teachers, all the way up to heads of state and other politicians, so that everybody just internalizes that there is equality. And I think it is achievable, but it takes longer than just putting a temporary measure in place. It does take just constant discussion. It takes role models. It may take affirmative action type measures, and then it takes time.
A question for you, Patrick. Do you believe, or do you think that the projects that you're involved in here, be it USAID and the EU, that they will have a mirror effect on governments? Because a lot of these things that we are looking at is, governments' influence, implementation of certain things, whether it's at the workplace, whether it's educationally. Do you think that they would have a mirror effect on society, so that even after these projects end, that the points that they brought about in the first place can continually be perpetuated? And I ask this question because I think about African traditional societies, and when they started sending girls to school, the only reason that other families started sending their own girls to school is because they saw the benefits of doing so directly. That they could see, okay, so and so's daughter went to school, and because of that, this happened. I too will send my daughter to school, because they saw, and it was left lingering, the example of what they could then follow. So these projects that you've put in place in Kenya, for example, do you see them at least very skeletal, the skeletal part of it, then being taken and adopted by countries, government, private sector to continue?
I do, because the simple fact is, whether it's a politician who wants to put in successful policies and get reelected, whether it's a business that wants to make a profit, the more that they focus on equity for women and girls, the more successful they're going to be. A child whose mother can read is 50% more likely to live past the age of 5. An extra year of secondary school for girls can increase their future earnings by 15 to 20%. And if 10% more adolescent girls attend school in a country, that country's GDP increases by an average of 3%. So those are facts. This is not fake news. This is real data that we have collected from the world. So by focusing on making sure that girls and women have equal access to education, that they're not having to drop out of school because they're becoming child brides, a practice that's been outlawed, then the entire community will benefit. And I think that that multiplier effect that you talk about, of other families seeing a girl go to school, recognizing that she's successful, recognizing that family is doing well, that's going to encourage them to do the same.
So as we have all this conversation about, the things that can happen to ensure that there is empowerment, I think, Patrick, you'd even alluded to some of the milestones that we need to look at. And you're saying, if we can get to a certain milestone where we say a certain percentage of women are part of the representation of leadership in parliament, for example, or a certain percentage of pay that currently is a huge disparity gets there, what other milestones are these that we can say we are looking at? Let's say, take the example of Kenya. So we already know that one of them is the constitutional gender equality and representation in positions of government, in positions of leadership. What other milestones are these that we can push and look out for? I'll start with you, Patrick, and then the same question you can take, Katrin.
Well, thank you. I think education is absolutely essential, and making sure that we have girls in Kenya being able to go through school, all the way through secondary school at the very least, is absolutely essential. About 30% of girls in Kenya have to stop their education because they become child brides. 1 in 5 girls in Kenya becomes a mother when she's still a child. And many of those girls never get the opportunity to go back to school. And I just told you about the amazing impact that educating girls can have on an entire country, on the productivity of Kenya as a nation. There's also, I think, a very important and unfortunately a difficult topic to talk about, and that's female genital mutilation. Many women across Kenya, about 21% of women and girls between the ages of 15 and 49, have undergone female genital mutilation, the cutting of their genitalia. This causes serious health problems. It was outlawed here in Kenya a decade ago. And just last Friday, we had an event together with President Uhuru Kenyatta in northern Kenya with community elders on a program that we call Kuta Injena. That means, in Borana, it means come, let us talk. And it's about teaching communities about the harm of female genital mutilation and getting them, empowering them to say, this is a practice that we're going to stop. Last Friday, President Kenyatta said, and I've got his quote here, he said, the girl child, just like the boy child, can be taught the very important traditions in our communities so that they can graduate as adults without being harmed. we agree. We believe that ending harmful traditional practices can be led by communities themselves as they re-envision what their norms and their values are, and they recognize that protecting the safety and rights of women and girls is an important part of their community. If we can do more of that, we will see not only women and girls in Kenya benefit, but all of Kenya benefit.
Thank you very much, Patrick. In a minute, as we conclude, Katrin, what is it that the EU would say these are the milestones that we'll be looking out for?
I was thinking of the same milestones as Patrick, but I think those are important ones, having girls be equally in education, making it to graduate, preventing teen pregnancies as much as possible, and having them first get a university education, etc. But we haven't talked about one sector that much, and that's sort of the private enterprises. And there, I think also we're seeing we need to see more women CEOs, more women in leadership positions, more women doing startups that sometimes fail, but overall startups that will bring Kenya forward. So that's another measure that I would also look at. Equal access to justice. We can look at indicators there. So there are various indicators in various parts. I think we shouldn't just focus on politics.
Right.
It's nice to have women in parliament, and I think it does help shape the agenda that's discussed in parliament. But in the end, it's in all parts of society.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Katrin Hagemann is the Deputy Head of the Delegation of the European Union in Kenya. And Patrick Wilson is the Deputy Mission Director for USAID Mission to Kenya and East Africa. Thank you, and happy International Women's Day again to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Spice up your life.